All right, thank you, everyone. I think we should be ready to go ahead and get started. Dorian, if you are off mute, you should be good to go.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate everybody being on here this morning. And let's see. All right, looks like we have a really good sized group this morning. Can you hear me okay, Jacob?
Yep, you are good to go.
Okay. So while our IT collaborative is hosting today's webinar, the strategies that we're going to discuss can be used in any industry. So you may wonder, why did we decide to form an IT collaborative here in Kentucky? Well, because like so many other industries, the struggle to find qualified employees is real. And even though there's a critical shortage of workers in the tech industry, the industry itself continues to grow, which causes a problem. So according to a study by Janko, after a major drop in the IT workforce in 2020, in June 2020, the IT employment exceeded 3 million people in April 2022. And it peaked at nearly 3.12 million employees as of January 2023. So US tech employment is forecast to surpass 6.1 million people, according to the job site Indeed, in 2032. So that's only 9 years from now. We're going to double in the number of employees needed in the tech industry. Also, according to the top 25 list of best jobs in the US, IT jobs took the top spot this year. And by comparison, in 2022, only 25% of the top 25 jobs were tech related. But this year, 2023, 11 of the top 25 jobs, or 44%, were tech positions. Also, of the top 10 positions in Indeed's list for this year, 8 of those 10 were tech jobs, compared to only 2 out of the top 10 last year. So understanding this current need for workers in the tech industry, as well as the future growth potential in this industry, the Kentucky Chamber saw that it was necessary to step up and begin helping employers in this industry, just as we've done in healthcare, manufacturing, construction, and other industries. So what we're going to share with you today is how the Kentucky Chamber Foundation utilizes talent pipeline management to help find and train employees. And we do this by organizing a group of employers, the industry employers, to work together as employers, finding employer solutions to employer problems. And these methods are effective. We've proven that they work. So what you're going to hear about today is not necessarily new concepts, but creative ways that our expert panelists have used each of these strategies to help them successful in their organizations. So today we are learners and we are followers, but tomorrow we'll be the leaders and we'll teach others how to build their talent pipelines, how to do that and do it well. So I'm going to give you a very quick rundown now of what we have in store for you. My colleague Jacob McAndrews is going to give you a brief overview of the talent pipeline management, what it is, and how it works. He'll then bring you up to speed on where we are currently in our collaborative here in Kentucky in the tech industry. Following that, we're going to engage a panel discussion with some experts who will provide valuable insight into creative ways they've used apprenticeship, internship, and customized training curriculums in the community colleges. Our last segment will teach us how to get really creative with our online talent searches using social media to find the best match candidates for our jobs. Last but certainly not least, our very own Lakeisha Miller, Executive Director of Kentucky Chamber Workforce, is going to close us out with final comments. So we've invited folks to join us today from all industries to be here with us this morning to learn more about how we utilize the TPM processes to assist our employers, as well as hearing from some of our TPM partners. So if anyone joining us here today would like to learn more about TPM, our collaborative work, or if you'd like to join our statewide collaboratives, please contact us following the webinar. We'll be very happy to connect with you. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jacob to tell you about the TPM and the Tech Industry Collaborative. But I realized I neglected to introduce myself. I think most of you know me because I sent personal invitations to get here today. But my name is Dorian Moe, Talent Pipeline Manager for the Kentucky Chamber Foundation. And the statewide industries I cover is technology, IT business, and also construction. So Jacob, we're going to turn it over to you at this time.
Excellent. Thank you, Dorian. And I appreciate that introduction and the kind of overview to the agenda and kind of what we're hoping to cover here today. And thank you all for being here. As Dorian said, my name is Jacob McAndrews. I am a Talent Pipeline Management Project Manager with Dorian at the Kentucky Chamber Foundation. And I'm kind of the second in command, I guess, when it comes to IT and business and trying to help Dorian keep that work moving forward. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes here for those of you who might not be overly familiar with Talent Pipeline Management, just to do a quick rundown of kind of what that looks like and what to expect. So the Kentucky's Talent Pipeline Management Program is housed under the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center, which is a part of the Kentucky Chamber Foundation. The Kentucky Chamber Foundation is the philanthropic arm of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and the Workforce Center is specifically focused on addressing workforce needs in Kentucky. And one of the core ways that we do that is through our Talent Pipeline Management program. And Talent Pipeline Management, it is a workforce development strategy that has been around for going on 5, 6, maybe even 7 years at this point. It is a program that was developed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that is now being implemented all over the country and in Canada, I believe, maybe even a couple other countries too. So it has definitely spread like wildfire in the last few years. And the overall goal of Talent Pipeline Management is to put employers in the driver's seat when it comes to workforce development strategies. I'm sure those of you on this call are no strangers to workforce and workforce development, especially if you are representing a company within the IT industry. I'm sure that you have been involved in a number of different workforce development initiatives over the years. But the kind of crux of Talent Pipeline Management is having the employers not just being in an advisory role, but the driving force behind the decisions that are made. And the general overview of TPM is kind of looking at talent pipeline management and talent supply chains through a supply chain lens, as if the talent that we're looking for is a good or a service that needs to be produced like anything else. It is essentially, taking that talent, getting them trained, getting them upskilled, teaching them the soft skills, giving them all the tools that they need to succeed for when they eventually wind up with our employers, which in this model are essentially the end customers. And so that does not mean that the learner is treated like a widget. That is something that the U.S. Chamber says emphatically that I think is definitely important to point out. But it does mean that we need to think about the way that we structure our institutions of higher learning and essentially just getting people the skills that they need. We need to think about that as if we are moving through the supply chain. We need to make sure that we have support, as you can see here on this graphic, along every step of the way, so that these learners, when they are getting the skills that they need, are constantly supported by both their educational partners and the employers down the line. And a graphic that I think really illustrates that well is this value stream chart from the U.S. Chamber Foundation that kind of illustrates the shift in supplier responsibility. And when we're talking about supplier, we're thinking about the training providers, the educational institutions, nonprofits in some cases, all are kind of under this supplier lens. And then on the right side, you see the employer responsibility and how that shift occurs throughout the cycle of a learner's progression through K through 12 all the way up to a career. And you can kind of see along this stream the different checkpoints essentially that a learner goes through on their way to a career. You start off with the career awareness and guidance, just making young kids aware of the different careers that are out there, especially in IT. I think the way that that connects is teaching kids that IT jobs are everywhere, right? You're not just working for an IT firm if you are interested in going down that path, but basically every single type of employer under the sun needs IT talent nowadays. And so that kind of comes along in the career awareness and the career exploration, and even into the career preparation and pre-employment training. All of this is kind of occurring in that K through 12 space. And on this top part of the graphic, you can see that the educators retain the bulk of the responsibility throughout this phase of a learner's journey, but it is not exclusively their burden to bear. The employer also has a certain level of responsibility, even during this early exploration period, in terms of making sure that the students and the employers know what skills are valued in that industry and to those employers. And then as the learner moves along deeper into their career, onboarding, career coaching, upskilling, the employer begins to take on more and more responsibility for that individual success in their journey. But as you can see, the supplier never truly falls off. Throughout this entire process of growth throughout the career, upskilling, and even all the way through to retention, it remains a shared partnership between the educators and the employers. So a quick snapshot of what TPM looks like in the state of Kentucky. Over the last 5 years, we have launched over 30 industry collaboratives. Some of those are statewide, some of those are focused in on specific regions, and all of them have a specific industry focus in which they identify the most critical jobs within that industry and develop strategies to fill the need for that talent. Over 350 employers have been engaged through the TPM process in Kentucky. These industry collaboratives have evaluated over 200 critical jobs across a number of different sectors and industries. And over 5,000 Kentuckians have been connected to either employment or training opportunities through the Talent Pipeline collaboratives. We aren't going to go into super in-depth detail about what the collaboratives do and the process that they all go through, but essentially it can be broken down into 3 main steps. The first step is bringing the employers to the table and identifying a shared need, a shared goal, a shared pain point that they can all work together to address. The second point, we do our homework. We do all of the sort of data collection and information gathering necessary to make informed decisions. That includes looking at demand projections for the critical jobs. It includes looking at the job descriptions that each of the companies has for that position to see if we are communicating the requirements effectively. And then the third kind of big step is solution building. We take that data, we take the employers that we have at the table, and we come up with solutions. Okay, who do we need to engage in order to be successful and create the talent supply that we need? Do we have enough training programs in our area that already exist, but for some reason, their graduates aren't coming to work for us, or maybe those programs aren't filled to capacity? What can we do to make sure that we are filling those talent needs as effectively as possible? As far as the IT collaborative specifically, it was launched in July of last year. 26 companies are currently engaged with that collaborative work. This one was a heavy lift. 29 different positions were originally evaluated. to determine what the critical need was, which just kind of goes back to IT being a very diverse industry sector that permeates into basically everything else that we do. So there are a lot of different positions that go into making that function. So yeah, 29 different positions were evaluated. We've identified 5 to 7 that we're really going to be taking a deep dive into building solutions for. And already 112 Kentuckians have been connected to training opportunities through a partnership with Jobs for the Future and KCTCS to provide online training and upskilling to those students free of charge. So that has been an excellent partnership that is only growing. The next steps for that collaborative are to identify those shared competencies for the critical positions, looking at those job descriptions I was talking about earlier, figuring out, are we communicating our needs effectively, and have our needs changed? A lot of times, we'll make our job descriptions and then just keep using them over and over again, even if, in the last 5 to 7 years, the true needs of the position might have shifted. So we reevaluate those different requirements and competencies to make sure that they are still accurate and see if we can align those as closely as we can and communicate them effectively to our job seekers. You can see here the different positions that we are targeting for these this initial push for those critical positions, including app engineers, software developers, project managers, business data analytics, and technical support. So that's kind of a 30,000-foot view of TPM in Kentucky and the IT collaborative in particular. If you are not a member of the IT collaborative and are interested in getting involved, you can reach out to myself or Dorian Moe to get some more information and kind of talk about those things that I ran through very quickly in a bit more detail. So I'll go ahead and put Dorian's email in the chat if you're interested. But with that, I will step down and turn it back over to Dorian for our panel discussion.
Thank you, Jacob. We appreciate that so much. Great information and letting everybody get a good overview of what we're doing. So while Jacob is getting our panelists all set up and getting their cameras on and having them ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the bios, and so you'll know who we're talking with today. First of all, we have Taylor Dunn. She is the Senior Manager of Talent Initiatives at the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation. Taylor is the Senior Manager that she is the first person to fill this role in the organization. She spent the last 2 years building EDC's position in the talent pipeline landscape, and Taylor works with and through the San Diego's largest employers, local education institutions, and regional workforce infrastructures to strengthen and diversify the talent pipeline and to help improve access to quality jobs for those who live in San Diego. Taylor also serves as the Talent Pipeline Management Fellow for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, providing guidance as an advisor on the continued expansion of the TPM initiative. In her first few years with EDC, she served on the operations team. Prior to that, she worked as a research assistant in Syracuse University. Taylor was born and raised in East County, San Diego, and returned home after receiving her bachelor's degree in economics and international relations in upstate New York. In her free time, Taylor enjoys traveling and adventuring outdoors with her family and friends, and spending time at home on her family's ranch with horses, donkeys, chickens, dogs, and cats. Taylor, I love that you have donkeys. Next, we have Mark Hamner. Mark is a Senior Manager of Application Engineer at Waystar. Waystar is a healthcare technology company, and basically, Mark described this as when you go into a doctor's office or hospital and some magic takes place there when you, as soon as you go in, they start working on your claim. They find out how much you're going to have to pay, make sure everything is billed accurately and on time, providers are paid, and all of that magic is what Waystar does. So Mark himself has been in IT for over 20 years. He's been with Waystar for 3 years, and he is responsible for the technical education, working with apprenticeships, internships, and creating content to upskill existing team members there at Waystar. He's also an adjunct professor of computer and information technology at Jefferson Community and Technical College. Next, we have Mr. Jay Johnson. He's the Vice President of Customer Engagement. He works with General Dynamics Information Technology, and he works with more than 2,000 employees and has more than 30 years of experience managing and optimizing engagement center operations in commercial and federal markets. He has experience in expedited engagement center startup, scaling operations, and improving operational efficiencies. He's worked for some of the nation's leading companies like American Express, Capital One, and now currently General Dynamics. He says he enjoys bringing commercial best practices into the federal market to support some of the nation's most critical missions. His passion lies in talent development, with a particular focus on entry-level talent. Now, Jay, I also have to add, because one of your colleagues has informed me that you have a hidden talent, and it's one that I share as well. And she says that your talent is that you have a difficult time finding your way to and from airports. You're frequently late and miss flights. Well, that's not a problem for me. I have been directionally challenged my whole life, but we get there and we have a fun time doing it. And we usually take the scenic route, but we make it. So that's the important thing. So at this time, we're going to get our panel started off. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Did you miss the introductions? Because I think my internet blinked off and on for a second. Did I get everyone's intro on there? Okay, good, perfect. All right, then I'm going to kick off our panel discussion by first just giving you an update and bringing you up to speed where we are currently in this Kentucky Collaborative. So we have been working to build that initial entry-level pipeline, and Jacob mentioned some of the positions we're looking at. We've worked with third-party trainers. We have some here in our collaborative, Code Louisville, Code Kentucky, and some others. We also recently partnered with JFF, Jobs for the Future, and the KCTCS community colleges. And they've allowed us to offer free courses through Grow with Google. And this is particularly effective because we're able to tap into the high schools and get students as early as 16 years old to take these classes because they're free, online, and self-paced. And hopefully this will inspire those young ones to take an interest in the career pathway in technology. Also, they can earn up to 12 college credits for prior learning. So it's a wonderful thing. We have over 130 enrolled now, and we hope to continue that. So we appreciate that partnership with JFF in helping us get these kids started. Also, we have had many ways that we have looked at filling the mid-level positions. So we would hope that building this robust pipeline of entry-level positions, bringing them into the industry, might push some of those who are currently in entry level up into the mid-level positions. Ideally, that could open the way to bring some of the mid-level on up into the senior level positions. So does that work? Well, yes, but not always. So how do we fill that pipeline with the mid-level positions? How do we upskill them? How do we focus on that level? So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's what we're going to learn about from our employer guests here today. So this time we're going to go ahead and start with some questions. And Mark, we're going to start with you first. You've been very successful in utilizing apprenticeship with your organization. Can you share with us how were you able to get both the apprenticeship and upskilling training program started?
Sure. Is my audio sounding okay, Dorian? Everything good?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes it goes a little weird on me. Okay. Hey, everyone. As Dorian said, I am Mark, and there are two programs I wanted to mention this morning to you. The first is our apprenticeship program. We, along with 12 other awesome local employers here in Louisville, participate in the BIT 502 apprenticeship program, which is a partnership between the local employers and Jefferson Community and Technical College, JCTC. And I'll tell you a little bit about the program, but first I want to go over its basic goals. And its goals are really simple and they're twofold. Number one, we want to provide a pathway to an awesome career in IT, whether that be programming, whether that be IT support or whatever, for folks whom the typical entry point, which as we know is a 4-year computer science degree, may not be obtainable at this point in their life for whatever reason. And number two, we want to remove what I'll call the experience paradox, right? Which is where so many entry-level jobs even these days are wanting 1 or 2 years of experience, but how can you get experience if you can't get an entry-level job? And if the job requires experience, how can you get the job without the experience? So the way BIT 502 works, it's a 2-year program and students go to school at JCTC 1 day a week. They take most of their classes online. And then they work with their sponsor, in my case, Waystar, 4 days a week. Right now, that's Monday at JCTC, Tuesday through Friday at Waystar. They are paid, and at the majority of sponsors, they are benefits eligible, meaning they can get medical, dental, vision, 401k, and whatnot. Now, it is a sponsor-led program, so each of us employers do it a little bit differently. Waystar's approach is a bit unique. We run 2 tracks, IT support and programming at Waystar. For our IT support track, it's more normal, I guess you'd say. These are help desk professionals, technical services professionals. We embed them day one with our technical services team, and they start working tickets and helping people like me out when we get locked out of our computer is acting up right from day one. And we've been really successful and had some great apprentices go through that. For programming, this is where it gets really unique. We at Waystar divide our programming track in BIT 502 into 2 parts. If you remember, it's a 2-year program. So we divide it into what I call a year of learning and a year of doing. The year of learning is where it's really, really different. We take our apprentices and we require no programming knowledge at all to join this program. So from day one, we learn at Waystar. I actually teach these apprentices at Waystar in a classroom style environment. We learn all the technologies we use. We learn, C#, .NET, JavaScript, all these tech things, as well as the skills that we are going to have that are going to be specific to Waystar. How do we like our code written? What are our coding standards? What tools do we use to get the job done? So not only are we training them on the basics, in addition to all the great stuff they're learning at JCTC, we're also teaching them specific stuff for Waystar. And that lasts, like I said, roughly 10 months to a year. And then after that, that prepares them for what I call the year of doing, which is where we embed them with one of our application engineering teams, and they begin doing real work that goes live in production for our doctors, hospital systems, and all of our customers. So the idea with that is that because they've had this year of learning with me, they are really, really well prepared for the year of doing, that year 2, where they can contribute to the team from day one. And they already know all the stuff about how Waystar likes things done, and they don't have to be retaught that by their engineering team. And the goal of both tracks, whether it be IT support or programming, is that once these apprentices finish their track, they are fully prepared to get an entry-level job at Waystar. And they're some of the top candidates, even in my opinion, better than some of the typical entry-level candidates, or a lot of the typical entry-level candidates we would see off the street, so to speak. So the way it started for BIT 502, I can't really take credit for it. It predates my time at Waystar. Our CTO, Chris Schremser, along with several other local IT leaders, got together a few years ago and saw these needs I talked about. We need to get more people into IT. We need to remove this experience issue. And they partnered with JCTC, and after a lot of collaboration back and forth, BIT 502 was born. So that's our apprenticeship program. I'll mention briefly our upskilling program, which I'm also super happy about. Our upskilling program I call Level Up. And it was actually born from BIT 502. It actually started with people wanting to sit in on those, existing team members wanting to sit in on those year of learning, those trainings. And what I ended up doing was just sort of recording the trainings and putting them out in our learning management system. Well, it's since evolved from that, and now there's well over 45 training classes available in our learning management system. Everything from how do we do agile processes at Waystar to how do you code intermediate level C#. So team members who want to learn more can. If you're an existing engineering, you want to advance your skills, you can. We've actually begun seeing business side people, whether they be growth, sales, product, start to look at this. If they want to move into the wonderful world of being a programmer, they can actually use these trainings to begin that journey as well. So that's kind of how it works at Waystar with our internship and our apprenticeship and our upskilling program.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate that. It's an awesome program. And I also wanted to mention to our folks that have joined the call today, if you have questions as we're going through and each of our panelists present their information, feel free to type those into the chat. When we complete the presentation and the questions that I lead them through, we'll go over to that chat and try to answer as many of those questions as we can. So Taylor, I'm going to ask the question for you now. You found success in utilizing internships, which later turned into paid internships. How did you get that program started?
Thanks, Dorian. Yeah, so as Dorian mentioned earlier, we represent a convening organization leveraging talent pipeline management. So we work directly with a lot of our clients who are the large employers in the San Diego County region. And what we were finding was that through some data and research that we did several years ago, we need to create more access to quality jobs for San Diegans. And at the same time, we need to open up a bigger pool of diverse qualified talent for San Diego companies. Tech is a huge industry in San Diego, and so that was a great place for us to start. And so what we started to understand through the talent pipeline management process was that, as Mark mentioned, the sort of experience paradox and the degree requirements were really barring a lot of folks from being able to enter the industry. And so what we wanted to do, what we ended up doing was using the employer information about the needs of industry, the knowledge, skills, and abilities to identify programs from around the county that were teaching to those skills and doing a good job at it and reaching and serving a diverse pool of candidates. So their programs weren't entirely difficult to get into. Many of them are community college or state college programs. And in San Diego and California, community college programs are inherently inclusive. Pretty much anyone can sign up for them. And in many cases, they're free. And so that really allowed us to open up the talent pool to, a population that really could serve anyone. And once we were able to find the programs within San Diego that were teaching to the skills needed, we, through a grant from JP Morgan Chase, were able to set up this internship program that offered students from those training programs the internships at small businesses paid for by the grant. So the reason that we wanted to focus on students from those programs is because through the talent pipeline management process, we were able to verify that those students were in fact being prepared in a way that employers needed. So we could say these are going to be good interns that are going to contribute positively to your business. On the other hand, we wanted to offer, since we were paying for the interns, paying their wages, we wanted to offer this to small businesses because we know it's much harder for small businesses to get their hands on the talent that they need. So ultimately, the goal was to, of course, provide a service to small businesses, extra support in the form of an intern, but also provide a paid internship to students who otherwise might not have been able to break into the tech industry because of the persistence of unpaid internships within the industry, which was really leaving a lot of folks out. San Diego is an expensive place to live, so it seems pretty unrealistic to have to go, especially if you're in charge of your own finances, to have to go a whole summer without a job or, going to school, working 2 jobs. So by providing a paid internship, the experience could really be something that was open to anyone.
Thank you, Taylor. We appreciate that. And also, especially that little nugget about one thing that in talent pipeline management, we're always looking for is how do we help the employers, because we're supporting them in these efforts. How do they pay? How do they find funding to pay, for like internships, and using that grant? That was perfect. Thank you so much. So Jay, we're going to toss the question over to you now. You've been very successful in working with community college down in your area in Louisiana to develop a very customized curriculum to help build and hire and upskill your folks in your industry. Can you tell us about that, please?
Sure, just a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me okay? Outstanding. So yeah, Dorian, first off, thanks for having us here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I represent, as I said in the bio, about 2,000 folks doing customer engagement work. Similar to Mark, these are folks that are starting as the most entry-level positions in the call center space, all the way up to kind of the service desk space, where we're supporting the technical needs of state and federal government. I had a unique business challenge, one in the call center space. I think, as everybody is probably familiar, we experience a good degree of turnover. That's just natural. It happens. It's happened for the 30 years I've been doing it. Instead of fleeing from that, instead I leaned into that, and I asked myself, why were these people leaving? And what they were doing is they were leaving because A, they were bored, B, they wanted new challenge, and C, they wanted to grow. So given that, we found an adjacent market, which was service desk. And we started to look at those two talent mixes and say, what's different? The phone rings, we provide information to customers. Same on both sides of the equation. What's different really is the technical acumen that the people in the service desk have. And often our technologists lack those basic customer service skills that our call center agents employ with frequency, right? So what we really did is we started working with a local community college in the area. And we expressed kind of the business need, which was, I need to take my talented call center folks who candidly, many of them would struggle to plug in a mouse, right? This is not their job as a technologist, but they aspire to. So what we did is we worked with that school and actually worked with the state of Louisiana to build a custom technical certification, a CTC, if you will, which is a state issued certificate that certifies people graduating this curriculum as a certified help desk technician. That's valuable for me in the federal space because it's not just me saying they can be a help desk technician, it's actually the state certifying it, which carries more weight, particularly when trying to waive some of those educational requirements that Taylor was kind enough to point out, where a lot of these roles require associates or bachelors. So we then looked at the curriculums. We found that there were two entry level, 101 and 102 courses, and two next level courses of 201, 202, both in the CIS or MIS space, Management and Computer Information Systems. And we looked at those two curriculums, and what we found was that much of that curriculum for the 102 class was repetitive of the 101. And when we asked the educators, why is this the case? The answer was, well, they may take the 101 class in their freshman year, and in their junior year, they're going to take the 102, so we have to refresh it. And I said, well, that's not going to be our circumstance. They're going to graduate the 101 on a Friday, and they're going to start the 102 on a Monday. And they said, oh, well, if that's the case, we can truncate that 102 class by removing those 3 weeks of refresher. And we did that for each of those curriculums. So we were able to truncate the training time down, which was meaningful for our population, because in that call center space, it's hard for me to give them a path to development that says 2 years later, you'll be able to do. I need to be speaking in weeks or months, maybe quarters, but certainly not years, to show them that path to develop. So we actually got it down to a 16-week curriculum. They take that on their own time during nights and weekends, but they're gainfully employed with me. So they're working with me, building that customer service experience. I'm also vetting them as an employee, making sure that they have the right work ethic and skills to be successful in these more advanced positions. We put them through that curriculum. At the end of that curriculum, they come back with that technical certification. And at that point, we're able to elevate them, which is why we call our program Elevate. And we move them from that call center role up into that service desk role. And what's really exciting is that's just lighting the fuse, if you will, because now you found a willing applicant that's interested in development. And now we sit down with them and say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Do you want to be a coder, to Mark's point? Do you want to be in cybersecurity? Do you want to be in platforms and cloud infrastructure? Because all of those are burgeoning markets within our IT infrastructure and space. All of them are looking for entry-level talent. So if I can create that pathway, you know, Dorian, I think in your discussion, you talked about that kind of middle management, right? What we've found is that one of the things that stifles the ability to get people into middle management is because people aren't leaving upper management, right? It's that chimney is capped at the top. So what we've done in that call center and service desk space is really remove that cap and said, we want our people to grow out of the service desk space. We want our people to grow out of the contact center space. And in doing so, it creates that natural vent that allows senior leaders to move on to more advanced positions in IT, creating more middle management positions for people to move up from entry-level supervision positions. And it creates that updraft, if you will, that lifts all boats, so to speak. So that's a little bit about the program.
Thank you, Jay. I love your program. That's awesome. I've worked with you for a few years now, and I truly love the way you work that out and set it up. So our next question, we're going to ask each of you, now that you've all presented the situations in your employment, how you got these things started. We'll just ask, starting with you first, Mark, tell us what were the biggest hurdles or challenges you faced and how did you overcome those?
Sure. So the biggest challenge that we faced with Bit 502 is just communicating, getting the word out, right? So to me, this is such, as I'm sure all the other programs we're talking about here are as well, such a life-changing, has such life-changing potential, right? How do you let people know about this? We really want to use this program to, as Taylor said, open up these opportunities to people who maybe not get these opportunities otherwise. So how do we let people know about this? I think there should be hundreds upon hundreds of applicants to this program. And we're trying to get there. We're not there yet. So the way we've tried to deal with that challenge is myself and Tiffany Jones Coleman, who is our awesome student success coach from JCTC, have been going around to local high schools, just talking to juniors and seniors, doing our road show. I do my Bit 502 song and dance, tell them why it's awesome, tell them what it's like to be a programmer or an IT support professional, and really hope to get them interested and excited in this. And we also are looking at other avenues as well. Just recently, I had the privilege of speaking to the Louisville Urban League's Workforce Wednesday meetings. I've got to go to a couple of those to talk to them about, look, here's the program. This is something that could be really, really helpful for candidates who want to go into IT. So it's really about just getting the word out, communicating, make sure that people know these opportunities are out there. So that's our challenge, and that's what we've been working to overcome by just talking to as many people as will let me in the door, basically.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great one, communication. Taylor, same question, challenges and how do you overcome it?
Yeah, I think for us running the internship program, the biggest challenge was really logistics, especially when it came to the software or computer science or IT internship program. There were a lot of students interested, and because we leveraged those verified programs that we had identified through TPM, and there were a lot of companies interested because like was mentioned earlier, everyone needs tech talent, right? So really the biggest challenge for us, and we used a third-party staffing agency to really help us execute some of these logistics and to serve as the employer of record for the interns so that the small businesses didn't have to take on that burden. But still logistics, persist, and they're really challenging at times. Really trying, especially when you want to make sure students get placed in the opportunity that they want to be in, and that companies are getting a student that's really qualified for the job they need done. So that was one thing that honestly, just like, we have to go through several rounds of internships to work out all the kinks and figure out what the best methods are going to be. And I think that will look different for everybody. And it looks different for us from every industry. IT isn't the only industry that we run this internship program in. And so we have to adjust the way we do these things based on the community we're looking to serve and the industry that we're looking to serve. The other thing is that when we initially developed the program, there was no incentive. I think someone asked this in the questions too. There was no incentive for businesses to keep the students on board because they weren't paying them. So there was no investment from the business into the students themselves. So we're still working out a way to really, mediate that, make that better. But one thing that I think is interesting is that a lot of the businesses did keep the students on board, or when the student was done with the internship that we were paying for, they would bring them on their own payroll because the student was that valuable to them. And in a lot of cases, students weren't ready for a full-time role. They, needed to complete their education. So it did work out and oftentimes allowed them to, move on to maybe bigger businesses that could provide them different opportunities following the small business internship. But those are definitely the two biggest challenges: logistics and businesses not incentivized to keep them on.
Yes, thank you, Taylor. That's awesome. So we got that logistics, and then often we only think about retention when we're thinking about employers or employees in our organization, but we probably hadn't given much thought to retaining those students in their training and in the internship piece of this. So thank you for bringing that up. That's something we can definitely put on our list to address and help our employers with. Okay, Jay, now we ask you the same question. What hurdles did you have? How did you overcome them?
Sure. Really twofold. The first hurdle that we faced was, one, finding an educational partner that saw their role in the community as not simply educating people to an educational standard, but also ensuring that people that left their educational and student or educational environment were immediately employable. So really finding that educational partner that was willing to sit down with business and open up the curriculum and allow for business input into, you're teaching a class on radio resistors. Nobody uses radio resistors anymore. We should probably replace that class with a class on cyber and how security in the app dev process is critical in that programming space, right? So really rethinking that and finding educational institutions that are willing to partner with the industry to change the way in which they educate folks. The second challenge that we face, candidly, is an internal challenge as an IT organization. When we think of the challenge of finding IT talent in the federal space, it's often finding that next AI, intent programmer, or finding that Amazon architect. So finding some of those people that have reached a pinnacle in their IT skills and their capabilities. So what we see is our companies specifically, wanting to invest in people that are at that pinnacle, and how do they get them even to the next layer, right? So lots of focus on those relatively few and how do they make them uber technologists, if you will. What we had to do is really engage leadership and say, but you know how they got to be those uber technologists? Ask them. They were often service desk techs 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And the reality is, if you think about a labor pyramid, the only way you get to that peak of that pyramid is starting at the base. So if we're going to invest in technologists, we need to not only do it in the top end, but also at the bottom end and some of those technical certifications. And then the last thing, I love, it was something that Mark said, I'll just hit on it again. In the federal space, one of our challenges is they have to have a clearance. In order to have a clearance, they have to be 18. So that limits some of those really young skill sets that are young employees that we can bring on. But cracking that high school market is critical. We need to get those kids that thought they were going to go to MIT, but just didn't end up getting the SAT score they needed. Or they were reasonably sure they were going to go play for the Yankees and they just didn't make the team. Or they were absolutely confident they were going to be in San Diego out by Taylor playing volleyball at UCLA, only to find out that, they just can't afford it. And about the middle of their junior year, they wake up and go, wow, I'm going to have to go find a job. And we lose a lot of those people to restaurant industries, to hospitality industries, because they think that's all they're capable of doing. And frankly, if we can grab those people right as they graduate high school and bring them into those entry-level skills like customer service and start upskilling them quickly in that space, we can take somebody from making, what used to be $12 or $13, now $15 or $16, given the recent market trends. We could move them up to $30 an hour in 3 years, which is just a staggering pace of economic growth for the individual.
Thank you so much, Jay. We appreciate that. So we've added that your pieces to our list as well now. Working with those educators, finding those who are willing to make some changes and be flexible in their method of teaching, and then also tapping into that talent of the ones who didn't make the cut for the college they selected and just kind of stopped in there, but finding those talented ones. Okay, we've got time for one more question. Again, we're asking everyone, please put your questions in the question and answer section, and we're going to pull out a few of those as soon as we finish here. But we had a couple more questions on the list, so you can pick either of them that you want to discuss with us. We wanted to hear either about how you measure success with these initiatives that you're using, or if you could share with us just how would you direct anyone else who wants to start implementing these programs? What advice would you have for them? Mark, do you want to touch on one of those for us first, please?
Choices. It's like me trying to find a Netflix show to watch at night.
So if you can make it short and sweet, just put them both in there. That's fine.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'll just do one. I'll talk about how we measure success of the program, because I think it is important to know that this is working, right? So the way I measure success is really simple, honestly. It's how many of my apprentices can I convert to full-time software engineers or IT support professionals. That's the basic level, right? You start as an apprentice, you go through the program. Are you able, because you're not, as much as I want to give everyone a job, and we've been very successful, you're not guaranteed a job because you go through the program, right? You come on, you get a job, we pay you during your apprenticeship, but our goal is that 100% of my apprentices convert into FTEs, right? And so that's the measurement of success. I am rightfully so graded at Waystar and by myself on how many apprentices I can turn into full-time team members at Waystar. And we've been really successful so far. Of our 2021 group, for example, I have now, as of 2 days ago, when we converted our IT support professional, converted 3 of our 5, and we still have almost half a year to go in 2021, and they're not even supposed to be done yet, which is really cool. So we hope to continue that trend. We were actually able to convert 2 of our programming track apprentices in the 2021 group just after the 10 months to 11 months year of learning. So even before that experience year, we were able to convert them into full-time team members, and they do continue their education at JCTC. Our CTO and everybody's really adamant on that, so I think that's really awesome, but they're now full-time team members for us. And we also want to eventually get to, down the road, measuring how these apprentices compare to, so to speak, off the street hires, right? Are they better? I sincerely think they're going to be better, but let's measure it like objectively. Let's talk to the leaders and things like that and see if they're better, so we can make tweaks to the program based on that feedback loop as we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Those are great measuring sticks for you to start out with. Taylor, you want to tell us, how do you measure success, and any advice for anyone else that wants to follow your path?
Yeah, I think the measuring success question is a great one. And I think it's something really important to keep in mind, especially for organizations like ours, business serving organizations or community-based organizations that aren't the employer themselves. So for us, we can't force anyone to change anything, but we're rather trying to move forward systems changes so that if someday we walk away and find a different priority, these things continue to happen, right? Businesses continue to have access to quality talent, students continue to have access to quality jobs, and generally, in this case, folks continue to decide to pay their interns because that's just the best way to get access to diverse and qualified talent. So we kind of differentiate in programs. We differentiate between outputs and outcomes. The outputs of our program are how many interns we can place through our internship program. And over the last few years, that's crept up to about 167 interns. Some people think that's a lot, and some people are like, oh, that's weird, I would have expected more. We really try to put a lot of value on the quality of the internship, and that's a piece of advice that I would give. Start small. So Mark mentioned 3 out of 5 of his apprentices are turning over into full-time employees just this year alone. That is amazing. Okay, so I think that 3, people who didn't have a job opportunity before that now have a job is very, very good. So we try to remember not to, quality sometimes needs to go over quantity, especially when you're just starting out, to make sure that they're quality employees, they can stay at the business and continue to contribute. As far as outcomes, we are starting to see a lot more businesses value paid internships and see that, you know, they're really going to block off access to these opportunities for folks that can't work for free in San Diego. And so that has become a good sign to see a lot of companies and organizations move their internship programs to being paid.
Thank you, Taylor. Great points. Okay, Jay, how about you? Measuring success and well, we'll just go with that one. We stick with that question. How do you measure success?
I'll probably take a more obscure or ethereal view of this, right? From my perspective, success to me is simple. How much do I have to publicize, and how much marketing and how much effort do I have to put into filling the next class of people that I'm trying to grow? If I'm doing my job right and the program is successful, then I'm becoming that employer of choice in my markets. And in doing so, I'm not having to sell the service, sell the capability. It's selling itself because somebody's aunt, somebody's nephew, somebody's niece went through the program, they graduated it. And it's those success stories that start to live and take on a life of their own in our culture and in our community. So really, we're in about our 5th or 6th year of these iterations. And I've got individuals that have been promoted 5 and 6 times since that's happened. So really using them as the use cases. Don't listen to me and tell you how successful it is when I'm talking to kids. I'm bringing them in and telling them that they sat in the same seat 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and now they're making 6 figures doing an IT professional job that they never envisioned they had a capability to do.
Perfect. Love that. Okay. At this time, we're going to turn over to our question. Jacob is going to select a few questions from that question and answer box. I know a couple of them were addressed to Mark and a couple to Jay. And we just, for the sake of time, we're probably only going to get to a couple of those questions, but we appreciate you putting them in, and we will follow up and make sure we get all of those answered. Jacob, you want to go ahead and pick some out, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First, just to reemphasize what Dorian just said, please feel free to keep putting your questions in here. And if we don't get to them today, we'll get an answer to you after the webinar. So please feel free to keep putting those in there. Mark, a quick one for you. Is your apprenticeship registered through the state?
Yes, we are. We're an officially registered apprenticeship through the state of Kentucky.
Excellent. For Mark and Taylor, when we're talking about the retention rates for students that complete the internships and apprenticeships, Mark, I know you touched on that a little bit. Taylor, do you know anything about the retention rate statistics for your work-based learning program?
I think we've had, of the 167, I think we've had somewhere between like 20 and 30 turned to full-time hires.
Okay.
And again, that's I mean, we think that's a good number because a lot of these students aren't done with their education yet, and there's no incentive for the business to bring the person on full-time other than it's a really quality person for their business, and they want to bring them onto their own payroll. So
great. For Mark, I suspect it's pretty rare for employers to have a dedicated tech intern lead. How did your position come to be, and were there any internal challenges in doing so?
Yeah, for whoever asked the question, you're 100% right. It is, and I see that amongst my partner employers here in Louisville. And it's just a different, it's just a different way of doing it, right? Not better, not worse, but a lot of my fellow sponsors are indeed juggling. Oh, I also manage our DevOps team, or I also manage this sort of thing. So I think it really speaks to the fact that at Waystar, just the amount of priority that our technical leadership and our leadership overall puts on this program. I mean, we talked a little bit, Taylor talked about numbers. One thing, and just to remember numbers wise, for those of you not in the Louisville area, I know we've got people from all over. We're not hiring people like some of the big companies in Taylor's neck of the woods. We're not hiring people at the Meta or Amazon or Google level. We're not hiring 10,000 software engineers. We're hiring maybe 10. So our VIP 502ers are a large percentage of what we're hiring. And the fact that our leadership has put that emphasis on that allows me to really focus on on that. My position just came to be through the inception of the program. It's just something that our CTO decided right from the jump that we really wanted to focus on. So I'm very thankful that they did that.
Thanks, Mark. Jay, there was a comment brought up about your point with the learners dropping out of the formalized learning process. Do you have any strategies or tips to share about finding and engaging those adults who have the interest but might be working in other industries?
Yeah, so ironically, we go back to the same place where we send our folks to get that education, to the community college system. What we find is that those people that have gone into the workplace, typically about 23 or 24, they wake up one morning and they look at their paycheck on a Friday and they say, this is not sustainable. I've got to go do something to change my dynamic. Often they turn back to community colleges to get that education, but they're getting an education largely in an uninformed career path, right? They're not sure what they want to do. They just know they've got to go back to school. So if I can grab those folks and have these programs set up in the community colleges, I can then bring them in with those help desk certificates. They can skip the customer service role and move straight into that role. And a lot of those folks have some very capable skill sets, right? They've been supervisors for the last 5 years, often in retail or fast food or other areas. Those are valuable skills. We've just got to figure out how to join them and embrace those skills into our workforce.
Thanks, Jay. So this, for the whole panel, how is this challenge different for Kentucky, where tech is less concentrated compared to nationally versus, for instance, San Diego, where tech is more heavily concentrated there than the national average? So Taylor, you might want to take the first crack at this, but then if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, I can't speak to Kentucky, of course, but one thing that I will say about San Diego, despite the fact, or maybe because of the fact that tech is so prevalent in San Diego, companies can really go anywhere to get their talent, especially with working from home or, remote work being so common now. So for us, the challenge becomes, how do we make sure that the people here have access to the jobs here? Because technically that's still a San Diego job. And if folks from outside of San Diego are getting all the high paying jobs and folks in San Diego can't access those, we create this really difficult dichotomy in our economy, right? So we want to make sure that the companies see the talent that's in San Diego and see the value in hiring someone that, is within miles of their headquarters, because we definitely want to avoid that, like I said, dichotomy in the economy.
Excellent. Last question. Again, anyone can kind of jump in on this. There are several questions around funding, unsurprisingly. There was a question specifically about grants. If anyone's worked with any grant sources for any of these positions, or just kind of funding in general, if anyone has any sort of tips and tricks or advice on getting the funding for these sorts of positions and projects.
Yeah, I can't speak to funding the internship, but often the curriculum development and the education is a funding initiative all of its own. What I found is in Louisiana, and also frankly with Dorian in Kentucky, right? We have found eager community college systems that are looking for ways to partner with employers. And at least in Louisiana, it's often as simple as me signing a memorandum of understanding for the school. If you train people in this curriculum, I will consider them highly for a position in my company. They take that letter, they put it onto their funding grant request, and they send it off to the state, and the Department of Education or Economic Development funds that grant. And it's, these aren't $1 million grants. They're often $50,000, $100,000 grants to tweak a curriculum, but they get that money. It doesn't cost the school anything, and we get the value from that.
Yeah, and Jacob, I'll mention from a funding standpoint, we are able to, through the fact that we do the year of learning and the upskilling, we've been able, and the fact that we're a registered apprenticeship, which was a big deal, and one of the reasons we really pursued that, we were able to get some funding from the state of Kentucky to help pay for the program as well. Certainly doesn't pay for the whole program, but every little bit helps. And if it's okay, I'm going to take 2 seconds, Jacob, and jump back really quick to the question about the state of Kentucky versus California, because I did want to kind of give a Kentucky answer for that. So one thing that I think is different it really makes communications a little bit more challenging, or getting the word out more challenging, where everybody knows that Google has a big IT presence. Everybody knows that Meta, Amazon, Apple, all those companies have a big IT presence. We have a lot of IT in Kentucky, but it's typically part of more brick and mortar type business. We have, Waystar is a software company, of course, but we also have IT in things like UPS or Yum Brands and things like that. So it's a little bit more challenging to let people know that, yes, the need is there. It's just not necessarily going to be from a company that's sitting there on your computer screen every time you fire up the your Mac kind of thing.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, Jacob, if I could, I just want to build on one thing that they were talking about Kentucky versus California, and not to disparage California in any way, but I know in Louisiana, what we find is often the larger the market, the larger the technical or the community schools or the educators, and the less willing or less interested they are in partnering with a unique employer about a unique niche need. So one of the things that we do is lean into that, find those what we call Goldilocks cities, right? Or Goldilocks schools that have the appetite to get bigger, grow, and collaborate with their community. And in doing so, they're a little bit more willing to get creative and partner with employers.
No, that's a really good way to think about it. Yeah, looking for that Goldilocks school that has the infrastructure necessary to carry out something like this, but isn't already oversaturated with other projects and things like that. I think that's a great point.
Well said.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for all of your answers, and to the audience for the questions. And I'll turn it back over to Dorian.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you all for such great information. And this was a wonderful discussion. We hate to have to cut off these questions because they're so good and so many more keep coming in. But as we wrap up, Jay, you and I have worked together for a long time. I highly respect you for your knowledge and expertise, and especially in this industry. I'd like for you to just give us your final thoughts. What advice or suggestion do you have for any of those on the call today that are not yet part of this collaborative? And our employer, as our employer champion, what do you think should be our next steps in our collaborative work, as this is employer-led?
Yeah, thanks, Dorian. I would offer a couple of things. One, be bold and brave. I love the idea of starting small, but think big. Think with a big, longer-term vision. Don't expect this to start in March and yield tremendous results in October. It's a slow burn, and once it gets started, it feeds itself, and it'll burn for years and years to come. So really have a vision. And two, I hate to use the euphemism, but it takes a village. We need educational partners. We need employment partners. And candidly, there was a conversation earlier about retention. I actually look at retention a little differently. Losing people from my organization to partner organizations in the market creates more senior tech talent, which creates more entrepreneurial startups, which creates a backdraft of a need for more talent. So I actually look at this as an opportunity to build the next Silicon Valley, if you will. And it didn't just magically appear overnight, right? Bell Labs started 60 years ago, and it grew and grew and grew over multiple decades to become what it is today. So I think it really is engage those partners around you, look for consortiums of support of other employers with similar motivations. Don't think of them as competitors. Think of them as partners in the industry that have a similar challenge, and you will be stronger together, united, than you are separate, competing for talent.
Thank you, Jay. I knew you could say that so much better than me. I really appreciate it. And also, I just wanted to let you know that we, as we begin to utilize these techniques and help our employers with the upskilling, we do have already within our collaborative several professional consultants like Mike over at Vsoft. We have Josh at System Solution, Interact, our friends at General Assembly, UK, U of L, many others are already in our collaborative, and our KCTCS system is very strongly connected. We credit Jesse Shook at the KCTCS systems office for helping us get this whole IT collaborative launched and off the ground. So these folks are here, they're already on our team, and they've been standing by patiently waiting, and they are ready to step in and help us in these next few steps as we begin with the upskilling and trying to get those plans in place. So to that end, we hope that we can also have more of these webinars, bringing our partners together. And also, we'd even like to have an in-person workshop and invite folks down here to the Kentucky Chamber, kind of put our heads together. We do need to tackle the retention piece. We also need to launch our efforts in the cybersecurity arena. We kind of focused on the IT side first because they are different. There's different skill sets needed, and we definitely want to tackle that huge cybersecurity challenge. But yes, we would love to have more participation with our employers and hope to get you on site at some point. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my colleague, Joe Frazier. He's from the Kentucky Chamber, our Executive Director of the Center for Diversity and Equity. I've heard Joe's presentation a couple of times, and I'm impressed more and more every time I hear it. I love how he makes this so simple, and yet I think you're all going to get some great tips from Joe from this presentation, recruiting a diverse candidate pool with social media. Joe, please share your information with us.
All right, I appreciate the introduction. Can everyone hear me all right? Coming in? Okay, awesome. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to come before you all and kind of talk about how we can get some more diversity in our candidate pools. I entered into this position in November 2021, so going on 2 complete years here in this role as the executive director for the Center for DE&I. And one of the questions that I get the most in this position is around, how do we get a more diverse candidate pool? We want more diversity in our employee makeup, but we don't know where to find candidates. And so one of the things that I'll be sharing, and let me go ahead and try to pull that up on my screen here, is around some practices using social media that you can get a more diverse candidate pool. So let me try this again. Okay, is that showing?
We've got you, Joe.
Awesome. Okay, so and before I kick this off, just want to do a special shout out to our sponsors here for the Center for DE&I, Brown-Forman, Columbia Gas, Toyota, Kentucky, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Okay, so recruiting a diverse candidate pool with social media. This is a case study that we did internally at the Center for DE&I for hiring for 2 positions, right? 2 senior program managers. We have replicated this with some other positions that we're hiring at the chamber, and unfortunately, it just didn't line up with this presentation to be able to incorporate that data as well. So what you're seeing here is going to be data just from this single time that we ran this program or tried this initiative out. So in the grand scheme of things, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our hiring practices, at a minimum, one of the things that I advocate for is that before you move forward with the search, you want your applicant pool to at least be as diverse as the region that you're hiring in. So, if you live in a state or, instead of hypotheticals, we can just look at the data up here, right? So when we look at Kentucky, this is what our racial demographics look like. So white is going to be 82.4%. That's white non-Hispanic. Black, 8%. American Indian, Alaska Natives at 0.3%. Asians at 1.7%. 2 or more races, 5.4%. And then our Hispanic Latino populations at 4.6%. And this is just statistics that we're pulling from the Census Bureau, right? So that in mind, when you have a candidate search for a position, before you start having interviews, you want that candidate pool to be reflective of these numbers as well. And that's what we were going for, is to get this kind of reflection in our candidate pool for our senior program manager role. In starting this kind of initiative, you need to make sure that you're using the right kind of applicant tracking system, one that allows you to see employee demographics as they fill out their application. So I don't know, a lot of you are probably familiar with the job search process, and then you have those optional questions around demographics that ask about if you have a disability, veteran status, optional questions around race and that sort of thing. So we didn't have that kind of practice together originally at the Chamber. And so we implemented that using Mighty Recruiter. We chose Mighty Recruiter because it was a free software or a free applicant tracking system to try this study out. And it would automatically track those demographics. The one issue with Mighty Recruiter is that in tracking those demographics, it doesn't separate them by position. So if you have multiple job positions you're hiring for, it'll pull all of that stuff together into one place. So you can't see by individual jobs. So you want to get an applicant tracking system that allows you to look at these different demographics. And again, these are the ones that we added in. The main thing that we were paying attention to is that racial, ethnic demographics. So we wanted to make sure that we hit that representation in our candidate pool. So the next thing is looking at social media. So for this instance, we use Facebook and Instagram. Then we also use Twitter. I'm more than happy to partner with different organizations to have more experience using TikTok, because I think that could be a whole nother untapped place to do boosted advertisement. But for this case study, we use Facebook and Instagram, and we budgeted out $100 to run an ad for 2 weeks. So $100 with your Facebook page, it can automatically be connected to Instagram. So this covered both platforms. And what we were really interested in was looking at the different demographic and geofencing options we can use when we do a paid advertisement on social media. So backing up a little bit, right? So a paid advertisement on social media, basically this is creating an ad that'll pop up in people's feeds as they scroll their Facebook page or Instagram, or look at their I forget the name of the daily posts you can make that last for 24 hours, stories, right? So ads that come up in your stories as well. And so $100, and with Facebook and Instagram, for the custom audiences, we were able to look at geographic locations. So we looked at our more diverse places in Kentucky, right? Being Jeffersonville, Louisville, Lexington, Frankfort, Bardstown, Shelbyville. And then for the interest, the categories on Facebook are rather broad, but we looked at majors, different job interests and that sort of thing. Job postings specifically with Facebook are treated as special posts. So it's the same with political posts, right? So when you go to that boosting section, at least with Facebook and Instagram, you can't put on racial demographics. You can do that for other kind of boosted posts, but job posting specifically, we weren't allowed to do that on Facebook. But we used these demographics and then ran this for 2 weeks. And as you can see down here in the performance, the reach and the link clicks is tracked through Facebook and Instagram. So we were able to reach 12,289 people in that 2 week period. And 268 of those folks clicked on the link to actually check out the job description, right? With Twitter, we budgeted out $140 and ran this ad for 2 weeks as well. Because of how the spending works with Twitter, we only spent $50 out of that 140. So you pay for the impression. It's $2.30 per 1,000 impressions. We got 21,000 impressions in the 2 weeks that we ran this. And what we were really excited about with Twitter is the ability to use their custom audience targeting, where not only can you do location, you can do languages. And so you see in these impressions down here, we got the most impressions for English, but also some for Japanese and Spanish. But even more impressive with Twitter is the ability to use custom audience targeting using keywords, looking at the way people tweet. And so I put together a list of 106 different keywords, phrases, and hashtags, right? So trying to think about, well, how can I get the most diverse candidate pool? I leaned in on hashtags like Black Lives Matter, Love is Love, Stop Asian Hate, Hispanic Heritage Month, Asian, Latino inclusion, just different things like that that I felt would grab a net of more diverse candidates, right? Thinking about what are trending issues, things that people care about, of different demographics, right? And so I came up with about 106 of them. What you see here is the impressions based off of these different terms that we use. And so you see what the highest ones were, right? Like history, Black Lives Matter, progress, equality. We got upwards of 500 impressions. So all together, right, looking at the results of this, we ran this back in October, and we had 30 applicants for the program manager position total. Granted, we had posted the position before we ran this ad. So the data you're going to see on this next screen is the 23 applicants that applied for the position within the 2-week period that we ran this boosted advertisement. So in those 2 weeks, right, looking back at our candidate pool, over half identified as people of color that applied for this role within the center. You can see on this table what that looked like. So, and think about the demographic numbers from earlier, right? So Asian applicants, 8.7%, Black applicants, 26%, Hispanic applicants, 4%, 2 or more races, 17%, white applicants, 43.5%. You know, thinking back to those Kentucky demographics earlier, this is well above the representation of Black and brown communities population-wise that we're seeing here in this applicant pool than we do proportionally when we think about the state's population. We asked about how do candidates learn about this position. So this was an additional question that we put in that optional piece for the job application. And you can see those results down here at the bottom with this table. But to summarize those, right, the big takeaways were that 48% of candidates learned about the position through Facebook, a targeted ad, or using the internet. Like they just said internet when they answered that question. When we look at that for candidates of color only, over half of our candidates of color reported that they heard about this position via our paid boosted posts. When we look at our white candidates, this is interesting. Over half of them used Indeed, but for our candidates of color, only one of them saw this position via Indeed. So that's just an interesting thing there. The majority of our Black candidates said that they found out about this position using word of mouth. So that hit 67%. If we took out the Black candidates who heard about this position via word of mouth, we'd be over 90% of our candidates of color would have heard about this position via social media through boosted advertising. That being said, granted, the majority of Black candidates heard about this via word of mouth. It could be the case that the people that they heard it from saw this posting on social media, right? So we don't really have a way to dig into that data further. But those were our largest takeaways. So again, you see down here in the tables, the different things on social media that we use. We didn't use LinkedIn because it costs $35 a day. So it was cheaper just to do Facebook and Twitter. And overall, we're again looking to replicate this more to see if this data remains consistent across different positions. So again, we've done that for 3 other searches right now at the Chamber. We're waiting to get all that data together. But we're also offering an opportunity with companies like yourselves and businesses to partner with us to try this out to see if it works for your candidate pools as well in creating and getting more diverse candidates to apply for your positions. Ultimately, what we would ask is in an agreement that we'll provide all the data, right? So we have all the hashtags we use, step-by-step instructions of how we set up these boosted posts. And we just ask that you share your data back with us to show how diverse your candidate pool was in trying out this kind of search. So we're really excited, you know, in the grand scheme of things, the approach that we're taking to applying for these positions is letting folks know that, you know, this is a numbers game. The more people who can see that you're hiring for a post, the more applicants that you'll get for a position. It's easier to get word of mouth out there, or just to get these advertisements out there in the space using social media. We trying to meet candidates where they are. You know, everyone has a social media page across some kind of platform. And this is just a way to cast the net to a wider audience, and hopefully a more diverse audience. And granted, we didn't try this outside of the state of Kentucky, so that's some other data we'd be interested in too, and looking at how we can attract a more diverse candidate pool. So I'm going to stop there. Let me stop sharing this screen, and I guess let's hear if we have any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Joe. I don't know if we have time for questions, but we appreciate the presentation and always just the thought behind the process that you put into creating that diversified talent pool. So appreciate it. And for everybody that's still on, as Dorian and Jacob mentioned, I am the executive director of the Workforce Center. So I get to work with Dorian and Jacob all the time. And of course, I work with Joe as well. So one, I want to thank you for your time and participation today. I know a lot of you still have questions. Joe does a fantastic presentation, and I know a lot of questions are still pending from our panelists. We will be sure to get you the answers to those questions. And if you have any questions that you haven't asked, please be sure to reach out to Dorian. She will be able to answer those questions or get it to the appropriate person who will answer the question. So as Dorian mentioned, I had the pleasure of wrapping us up today. First, let me just say thank you to the most fantastic panel that I've seen in a very long time. You can tell, you know, Mark J. And Taylor, you are so passionate about this work and being creative. Jay, I think you're the one that said, you know, start small, but think big, which is huge. I think, you know, a lot of times this can be overwhelming for employers, whether you're in the IT industry or not, to figure out where do you get started. And I think one thing that is relevant is there's not a one size fits all, right? You know, Mark is implementing different strategies than Jay and Taylor, and you can as well. So Dorian and Jacob, thank you so much for bringing us in this webinar and sharing just a lot of these creative ideas for creating talent, specifically in the IT industry, because we know the IT industry is growing at a tremendous rate. And we want to make sure that the talent is available for years to come. So with that said, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending this webinar. I know Dorian is, as she said before, and as well as Jacob, if you're interested in TPM, please let us know. We want to make sure that you're at the table, not just attending the table, but really being an active participant. And also, we hope to continue these series. So please be on the lookout for follow-up emails and conversations from Dorian and Jacob as we continue to grow this discussion. But until then, have a great rest of your week, and thank you for attending.